Hello, hello. Please come in. Our Red Mage only journey is concluded, and it's now time to go talk through it all. From the Castle of Cornelia to the Ridorana Cataract, let's get into it. Every summary video I do, I like to cover a new area of comparison. Something different I can talk about in comparing the different runs. Every video gets difficulty, every video gets the coveted recommended review, but I like to have a third thing as well. Humans love threes. And in this video we'll be starting with, how does it Red Mage? Because Red Mages are a really interesting design consideration. How do you design a class that has access to white magic, black magic, and physical prowess without having it step on the toes of more dedicated characters? And without making it garbage. And while all of the Red Mages have similar-ish approaches, I think it will be fun to talk about each game in sequence and rank how well the specific design fits the brief of being a Red Mage. And we start with our first game, Final Fantasy I. FF1? What are you doing up there? In first place? Yep, I honestly think they nailed Red Mage in Final Fantasy I, and I think it deserves the top spot on this ranking. Which is not what I was expecting going into the series, but they just do so many things right out the gate. I mean, it helps that every class needed to be designed to remain useful and important throughout the entire game, because that is how the class system works in this game, but they also did quite a good job of balancing the spell access, weapon access, and stats to make Red Mage useful, but not overshadowing the other classes. Now, I'm not going to say it's perfect. I have some opinions about a few spells that they probably should have gotten access to, but that's kind of nitpicky. Red Mages in Final Fantasy I really do act as a jack-of-all-trades class, and are pretty good at it. They lack the heal spells, so they can't heal the entire party, but they do have Cure. They don't have the best offensive magic, but they do have a good amount and can deal okay damage with it. They continue to gain access to increasing weapons throughout the entire game to keep them capable at physical attacks throughout. Honestly, the only reason I considered putting FF1 below first was that the good design in the class is let down by the bad design of many of the game's boss encounters. Red Mages casting magic deals less damage than Black Mages, enough less to be significant, but not so much less to be bad. The problem is, then, that offensive magic in FF1 is all bad, regardless of stats. The turn order being essentially random also means it is difficult for Red Mages to heal effectively. Not because they can't heal very much, but because their healing is single target and it's really hard for an ally to survive 2 attacks. And they can't heal the whole party at once. So yeah, I will be placing FF1 at the top of the how well do they Red Mage list, but with the slight caveat that they would actually be the best if they were in a better balanced game. And next is Final Fantasy III. And anyone who has seen the FF3 video in the series may, pretty reasonably, expect me to put FF3 in last place. But actually, it will be going in second to last, because I actually don't think it's the worst Red Mage on this list. In fact, if I were judging by the Red Mage on the first half of the game, I might have placed FF3 in first, honestly, because I think it actually does a really good job. For a while. They have good, but not peak, weapon access. Their spells are quite strong, but they get fewer spell slots and actually get access to higher level spells slower. I actually had to grind a few times just to get access to a spell I needed to progress that I would normally have a couple casts of by that point. But this feels right for the jack-of-all-trades class, and really, for the first half-ish of the game, the FF3 Red Mage is really well designed. Thanks to dual-wielding shields and rune staves, Red Mages actually stayed usable for a lot longer than I had otherwise expected. But then we reach the end game, and the cracks really show. Now, this isn't a failure of design, not really. It's more a show of the game's decision to effectively time out classes. Of course Red Mage starts to suck in the late game. It's a beginner job. By the later portion of the game, you should have long ago switched your characters to the better jobs you have gained access to. And Red Mage suffers more than most by not having a clear upgrade. Most other early classes have clear intended upgrade classes. White Mage seamlessly transitions into Devout, Evoker transitions into Summoner. Red Mage has nothing. Honestly, if there was a better Red Mage, I probably would have changed my character's classes like I did in FF1. But it really doesn't. The closest you kind of get is Sage, but that's more an upgrade to every caster and has basically no martial prowess. So Red Mage starts off great and is let down by the fundamental design of the game. So it gets to be not last, as a treat. And a half-hearted apology for the rest of the FF3 rankings that we will be getting into shortly. And Final Fantasy V, which unfortunately gets to be relegated to last. Listen, I'm not happy either, but FF5 Red Mage is just kind of a mess. You do get continued weapon upgrades, and even at endgame, Red Mages can actually deal pretty decent damage with physical attacks. But it's really in the casting that Red Mages fall flat. You get Red Mages from the Water Crystal, and immediately get access to 3rd level magic, which makes Red Mage feel really strong and versatile and useful. And this is a lie, because this momentary power is the strongest Red Mages will ever be. It's all downhill from here, because Red Mages never get access to better spells, making it feel like you've hit a power wall as soon as you get the class, which feels really bad. But even aside from the weird spell progression, there's other issues. Red Mage, like the other spellcasting classes, only learns progressive red magic, until the absurd level 4 requirement of 999 ABP, but this too isn't very good because it's redundant to equip on Red Mages, and is really only good to equip on other spellcasters. Red Mage's signature ability is trash for Red Mages. No, bad design. Stop that. But even with dual cast, Red Mages are still not great after the mid-game. Because while casting 2 different spells is great, casting 2 Kiras is not Kiraga, and 2 Thundaras is not Thundaga. The damage your characters can do just keeps falling, making Red Mage itself only useful to master and equip dual cast on any other class. I think the biggest issue with Red Mage in Final Fantasy V is that it shouldn't have been in the game. Unlike prior games with class systems, Final Fantasy V has a versatile system, letting you equip secondary abilities to pad out a class. If I wanted to make a Red Mage without being a Red Mage, I could just go Spellblade with White Mage as secondary. That's basically just better Red Mage in most ways. And it shows in another class game with even greater versatility, Final Fantasy Tactics, which doesn't have a Red Mage at all, and that's probably for the best. Like Tactics, I think Final Fantasy V just shouldn't have had Red Mage, because it struggles to fit in a game and work in a game where characters are this versatile without it. Alright, time for the palate cleanser that is Final Fantasy XII, which goes in second. FF12 did not have a class system in its original release, but it was added in the International Zodiac Job system that was then used as the basis for the Zodiac Age remaster. And that kind of explains why FF12's Red Mage fails to earn the top spot, because Final Fantasy XII's Red Mage is real weird. They don't get access to basic white magic or black magic at all, only gaining access to the middle spell levels, but not high or low level. That just feels wrong. I mean, it makes sense given the limited space to have all these licenses, but it makes the Red Mage very odd to chart out gambits for because they don't have access to some key spells at levels when they are actually usable. Speaking of gambits, Red Mage's unparalleled diversity really strains the limited gambit slots each character can have, and more than any other class. If I want a gambit to auto-heal statuses, I usually just use Asuna. Yeah, it's more expensive, but it covers almost everything. Whereas Red Mages do not get Asuna, except one character who can get it behind Shemhazai. And I should point out that the Espers blocking other licenses really hampers the Red Mage as well. Red Mages can, at least in theory, equip Greatswords if you kill Chaos, Ultima, and or Zodiark, aka enemies that are way harder than the final boss. Do you want tier 3 elemental spells? Well, they are locked behind an Esper whose level's high enough that by the time you beat them, it's past the point where the spells are actually all that useful. So yeah, I really like FF12's Red Mage, but the limited license grid aspect leaves out a lot of spells that they should probably have had access to, and the most important improvements are locked behind Espers that are too late to be useful, and even then, only one character can get them. It doesn't push FF12 below second, but it definitely keeps it out of first. Well, weren't those rankings fun? But it's time to hop back in the classics, with the difficulty ranking. And I start with Final Fantasy I, as is tradition. And Final Fantasy I gets to be third, yep. Red mages actually hold up quite well in FF1, not surprising given how high they were placed on the design ranking, but that versatility really shines in this playthrough. Having access to healing, attacks, and buff and debuff spells is very, very good. It's not all sunshine. Red mages' spellcasting and healing are a lot more limited than a dedicated caster, and not having access to the heal family of spells really sucks. But the healing and damage are pretty comparable to other classes. Plus, they are a bit more durable and have a bit better armor than most mages, which helps them stay standing in some of the late game fights against bosses that hit a little too hard. I managed to beat Chaos at a way lower level, and honestly, I think that is mostly just because red mages have all the buff spells to increase attack damage, but also start at a higher damage level. All this means the playthrough was actually quite breezy in most places. Honestly, the biggest issue was affording all the spells and weapons I needed throughout the run. Red mages are really expensive to outfit, but it wasn't too difficult. And then it was Final Fantasy III, and we can slot that right into the top slot because Final Fantasy III was a nightmare for red mages. Again, most of this comes down to game design rather than the actual class design. The fact that classes age out of usefulness is real rough for any single class run. And while red mages hung on to effectiveness a lot longer than I'd expected, they just couldn't stick the landing. And the last sequence of fights were just awful, and not even in an interesting way. Gaze upon the big wall of endgame bosses being sped up to hundreds of %, even though I was at max level. Yeah, no, I excluded FF3 from my Black Mages Only series, and I regret including it in this series. Unless it did like bonkers numbers in the algorithm. I'm recording this before that video has released, so I guess we'll see. It's Final Fantasy V time, and it gets to be in second. But to be clear, the gap between first and second is actually quite large. While Final Fantasy V was more difficult than the lower two games, it wasn't awful. Red mages, for all my critiques in the design section, really are pretty versatile in this game. Honestly, just having a reliable healing method in Final Fantasy V can make all the difference. I didn't have to farm Gil to get Flame Ring so I could heal with fire spells. It was great. And red mages really cut through the early to mid game. It was really only near the end, right around Exdeath's castle, that they started to not keep pace with enemies. But the sheer versatility of dual cast did mean I could usually keep pace with enemy attacks and deal damage. Not good damage most of the time, but it was damage. And there was definitely some tedium in the final sections caused by red mages just being kind of lackluster. I actually had to level up red mages 5 levels higher than black mages at the very end, which was very surprising. That stamina penalty really hurts the HP bar, and while rods still dealt good damage, it was very clear that black mages had a considerable advantage in the magic stat and magic damage. And healing. Actually, wow, red mages are not good in this game. Anyway, it's Final Fantasy XII, which goes in last. For all my gripes about the weirdness of red mage's design, it is actually very good. Having access to Cura and Curaga is great. Maces may not deal amazing damage, but the damage is fine enough. And my party was mostly able to keep themselves up and running without any real shenanigans. There were a few bosses that caused issues, Ahriman and Daedalus spring to mind, but having access to good white magic buffs and having decent black magic for offense was pretty good. And while arcane magic suffers from being unusable against a decent number of enemies, thanks to many enemies resisting or absorbing dark damage, dark is actually quite strong, and Ardor is just busted, dealing more damage than my black mages were dealing with shock in pretty equivalent casting times. Oh, yeah, probably should have mentioned that as a ding against it in the design section, red mages probably shouldn't be out-damaging black mages with spells. Oh well, made my life easier. And that's difficulty completed. So it's time for everybody's favorite category, would I recommend it? And we start with FF1, which, places third, I guess? Honestly, despite how highly I praise the design of the Final Fantasy I Red Mage, and the playthrough isn't that difficult, I really struggle to recommend FF1 full stop, actually. It's a really old game, even the Pixel remaster. Like, on a fundamental level, certain systems don't really work very well. Like, offensive magic has very limited application after the first 2 hours. And that's a whole segment of Red Mage's abilities that don't really matter. Other than, temper and haste. So yeah, Final Fantasy 1 has aged, and the design would need some work. And while Red Mage's Only is better than Black Mage's Only, and probably more interesting than a regular run because you do have to think and do some problem solving, I still can't really rank it higher than third. And I do feel a bit bad about always relegating the first game in a series of games I love and adore to very low on my recommended list. But, FF3 goes in last. This is not a competition. FF3 Red Mage's Only is a really fun experience that turns out to be miserable right at the end. And it's a gradual issue that really just hits a wall right at Xande, and gets significantly worse right after him, while dealing with the other endgame bosses. And yeah, Red Mage is pretty well designed for the periods of the game it is actually designed for, but shocker, that's not actually good enough. And yeah, Red Mage actually stayed usable a lot longer than I thought. I really expected everything after the Fire Crystal to be awful. And it actually wasn't. Even bosses I was worried about, like Hein and Garuda, were manageable. Took some effort and clever tactics, but those bosses can be brought down without playing the game the way it wants. But the final series of fights are just not about that life. And I think that's the issue with Final Fantasy III. It's really fun when you play the game the way it demands you to play it, but if you do try to play it differently, you get squashed by 100,000 HP bosses that can heal themselves. Huh, Ahriman really did just try to wall 2 of the 4 runs. And this puts Final Fantasy V in second, which, to be frank, I didn't really want to do. Final Fantasy V Red Mage is not well designed to be a Red Mage, and the existing versatility in the game really overshadows what Red Mage can accomplish. And while Red Mage starts off powerful, it only becomes comparatively weaker as the game progresses. It basically just functions as a gatekeeper of the strong, but completely unnecessary, dual cast ability. And to be frank, a class as iconic as Red Mage deserves better than to be a stepping stone to a better build. So yeah, Final Fantasy V gets to be second, but really that's just because it's standing on the back of very miserable giants. And Final Fantasy XII gets to be first, because Final Fantasy XII is really good, and it's challenging in places, but it never feels bad to play. You get a lot of abilities, and are decent at all of them. And especially having done a Black Mage only run, I can really feel the difference in damage output. But Red Mage does, in the way Jack of all trades classes should, shine in other areas to make up for its weaknesses. Maces deal good damage, being usable for basically an entire game. The spells are many, and very useful in different circumstances. While there are some changes I would like to see with Red Mage in Final Fantasy XII, I still think it manages to be the best Red Mage's Only experience. You can't overpower the enemies with what you have, but you can outmaneuver them through sheer volume of options. So, Final Fantasy XII gets to be placed top spot in my recommended list. This is not surprising, I saw this coming before I even started this series, but here we are, and as usual, I am right. And that is all. Our Red Mage Only journey is over, the summary thereof is completed. I've said all I feel I need to say about it. But if you disagree, you are welcome to try any of these runs yourself, and let me know how you find them. Perhaps you disagree. But that is all. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like. Maybe leave a comment down below if you also have an opinion you'd like to share. Hey, if you'd like more of this, subscribe. I release videos every Friday. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.